How we doing, everyone? I don't know. I'm probably I don't know, thinking I'm probably 3 hours, maybe even 4 hours late from when I originally said I would be coming back on. I didn't realize I hadn't slept in a while, so once I finally decided to, my body disagreed with me on my original plans. So I was able to run for 3 nights on that old school you know, ranger school mentality or ranger mentality of 2 hours, 3 hours of sleep and still get up and look like you're doing your thing. But I have to admit that, hey, John, what's going on? I have to admit that I'm quickly learning that I'm just a man as I slowly creep towards my grave. So I often say that there's no you know, y- I remember this time in Afghanistan. One of those cool guy helicopters came in, and I remember the helicopter lands, and uh, the guys get out, but you can always tell who the main guy is when a group of people get off a helicopter in a combat zone in the middle of the night. So some soldiers get out, but then a guy dressed in civilian clothes, he gets out. He's got this long, scraggly beard, and the guy's gotta be 60 years old. He's got to, minimum 60 years old. And my first thought was, what is this old man doing out here in a combat zone? But by this time, I had seen enough stuff to while, even though I asked myself the question, I was able to in real time say, I was able to answer my own question. Maybe that's what I'm about to say to you. I was able to answer my own question. And I answered my own question by saying, there's a reason this old man is out here. Uh, I remember a movie that I really like, a movie that I enjoy, the um, the Way of the Gun, Benicio del Toro and Ryan Phillip, their main characters. Check it out. Reason why I liked it was one of the first movies that I saw when I came back home. That, let's just say, the gunplay was accurate on the movements. They clearly had some training from a special operations person or a person who trained special operations. So it was pretty obvious. Um, and there's a saying in the movie where there's a scene where older guy is kind of having this confrontational look, eye stare moment with some younger guys, and he looks at them, these two younger guys, and he says to them, "There's only one thing you should ever assume about an old man, and that's that he survived." So between that scene in the movie after I came home, but being in country, I try to carry that to this day where the only thing I assume about old men is that they survived. Now, naturally, as you get to know them, you might learn other things, but I don't think that's a bad way to move through life. Um, you see an old man, start off with one assumption, or old woman, they're a survivor. Go from there about how you build your relationship with them. So tonight, um, like I said, I started later than I wanted to start, so we're not going to get too heavy, too crazy. Um, but anyone who wants to jump on and talk with me, if you're up, and if you're kind of up, if you're on a crazy schedule like me, um, please hit me up on the side, private messenger. I'm following on the chat threads here. I'm now not mobile, so I have multiple screens like I normally do, so I can do a better job of following things. Um, I definitely have to work on my mobile setup. Um, But if you want to just come in, chat with me, if you're up, definitely hit me up on the side, let me know. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and get into some things. I'll just do a little recording, a little talking. So, last night, if you were following any of our 11 and a half hour marathon presentation, hey, what's up, Anthony? Um, you saw that overall, the light was pretty low key. Um, and actually, let's just get this thing rolling up. We don't have to start off slow. So, yesterday was very um low key. No shootings, no fires. Here's the thing, though, everyone. There was a lot of Black Lives Matter protesters out last night. You can find the videos online. They started moving downtown by the water through Allendale. Very beautiful area. Um, I don't live there now. Won't say I'll never live there again. But they started through that area of town. Very historic area. That's why I bring it up. Uh, they then came up to uh, through the courthouse area, that area moving up, coming inland basically into the uptown areas, but no violence and no fires. So what happened? Did we just simply get the good protesters, or did the protesters decide to change their behavior because now they had all these soldiers in town, FBI, DEA? Is that what happened? I'm going to say no, that's absolutely not what happened. I'm going to say what you saw was the removal of certain groups. So let's go through those four groups. Let's call them A, B, C, D. Group one, let's call group one Black Lives Matter and or protesters, whichever one you like. They're really synonymous. I had a conversation with a gentleman earlier today where he said, well, the protesters. And I said, well, I'm Black Lives Matter. And his response was, I never said Black Lives Matter, Ray. Who is protesting that is not Black Lives Matter out there? Who is protesting? I didn't ask who is looting, which is a crime. I did not ask who is rioting, which is a crime. I did not ask who was a mass shooter, which is a crime. So I'm not talking about mass shooters. I am not talking about terrorists who commit acts of terror. I am talking about protesters. In America, one of your rights is the right to protest. So, who currently is out protesting following an officer involved shooting of an unarmed Black man that is not affiliated or aligned with Black Lives Matter? I think one common thread I'm going to tie into in and out tonight is words should have weight. Words should have meaning. I often talk about manhood. You heard me talk about last night about tiny heart syndrome. You'll hear people talk, oh, we want to fix this country, bring the Bible back into school, make prayer safe again. One of the main things we can do, start using words that mean something. When you open your mouth and sounds come out of it, make it have an actual articulation and much as possible, a clear articulation and communication. So group A is protesters. Group B is collectively rioters and looters. Looters are stealing things of value, taking things of value. Rioters are destroying things of value. So there's a group who burns the money like the Joker or like John Wick. And then there's people who take the money, like the bank crew in Heat or any bank heist movie you've seen, Ocean's 13. You can technically call them looters. They stole something of value. They took something of value. When you see that group throwing a brick through the window, then running in and taking out clothes, running out and taking TVs, that is a looter. When you see someone destroying property that does not belong to them, because it is legal to destroy your own property. If it's your property, go ahead, buy your Ferrari, take a sledgehammer to it, put it on YouTube. You'll probably get enough hits to buy a new one, unfortunately, in this culture. But what we're talking about here and now is just rioters and looters. That's Group B. So let's recap. Group A is protesters, which is legal. Group A is rioters and looters. And can you protest illegally? Sure. Maybe you didn't pull your permit or something like that. If you want to go down that route, sure. Go ahead and split those hairs. Say you didn't pull your permit. You can do that. Whatever gets you to sleep tonight. There's another group, C. Actually, let's back up. Group B. In order for Group B to have the freedom of maneuver, that's a military term, to have the freedom of maneuver, meaning to be able to move as freely as they were able to. Group B needed to conceal themselves in two things. The first thing they needed to conceal themselves in was the night. If you notice through these previous days of unrest, this was not happening during the day. You can even look at other events across the country. Ferguson, Portland, it did not stop when the sun came up. It continued through. Chaz, I think it was a Chaz out in there in Seattle. Chaz wasn't abandoned during the day, and then the hill was retaken by Antifa communist forces at night every night. It wasn't every night the cops were just beat back. The conservatives were just beat back. And actually, let's go back to that later because I want to know why all these tough guy conservatives did not go in there and take back Seattle. I think I know the answer, but we're going to talk about it later. So the first thing was the night. They needed the concealment of night. Now, the second thing that they needed for freedom of maneuver, the ability to move around easier, uncontested, unmolested. What they needed was Group A. Rioters and looters, Group B, used the night and Group A as cover, as concealment. This provided the opportunity to be Group B. This was a crime of opportunity because Group B is criminals. Therefore, their existence was by default a crime of opportunity. You took away the Group A, the protesters to hide amongst, and you take away the night. You no longer had Group B. That's what you saw happening. Now, that wasn't the sole thing Group B needed. So we'll get back to that. Next, you had Group C. Group C is the military and the police. The military, to my knowledge, was only present in full uniform. There could have been military members who were on foot, not dressed to be identified. It's possible. Um, I, I find it unlikely. To my knowledge, I've been out of the business for a little while, but the nearest National Guard Special Forces unit is out of Chicago. But yes, they could have brought up some of them from Chicago. It's quite possible. 20th Group Alpha companies based out of Chicago. Completely possible. Um, they're the only group within the National Guard with that kind of training and that justification for urban warfare to engage on the ground. So it's possible, but I believe that if you asked me to put money on it, I would say 100% of the military presence on the ground in Kenosha, um, both mobile and on foot, I would say was in full uniform. Now the trickier group is the military, sheriff's department, police departments, adjacents. There was full uniform, there was mobile, there was SWAT, there was plain clothes. That was very obvious. There's even plain clothes on motorcycles. Um, so that was a more anomalous group. Their numbers were varied from night to night. So indirectly, when their numbers were of a lower frequency, a lower raw count, this also aided Group B. Group B was also able to leverage this as an opportunity. The rioters and the looters, that is. So again, for recap, Group A, protesters. Group B, rioters and looters. Group C, military and police, with police of a much more varied rainbow than the military. Finally, we have Group D, white nationalists, white supremacists, far right, alt-right conservatives. Now, this is a group that America doesn't like talking about directly, or when they do, they start asking very stupid questions. Well, Ray, before you say that, what's their name? You know what no one ever asked me? Or you know what I've never heard? I've never heard that looters and rioters, you know, gay, guys shooting people in the hood. I never heard they're required to have a group name before we recognize their existence. We just say it is because of their actions. I saw someone write, and basically it's a challenge to prove that there was white militia. Do they have a mailing list? I've never heard anyone in response to say, hey, we have gang violence. Prove it. Show me the MS-13 mailing list. Show me the Bloods and Crips mailing list. Show me their membership cards. Because if you can't show me their membership cards and their material list, then I don't think you've proven that gangs exist. We had a white militia, white nationalist, and white supremacists collectively for Group D on the ground in Kenosha. This was another criminal entity or collection, call it a syndicate. This was a terror group. These were terrorists. So they don't actively align together. Like I don't believe there's evidence they have formal meetings where they all sync up, but they had a common cause that they aligned under. No different than overseas. The terrorists don't have meetings. There's just this overall idea: we hate Americans, or we hate the Christian West, or we just hate the West. That's just an overall idea. It manifests in different ways, but that's the overall idea. Kill the infidel. That's what you saw last night. We hate the city. We hate Democrats. We hate minorities. Overarching idea. Minorities, progressives, left of center, they are our enemy. And anything we can do to engage our enemy, that's what we're about. That's what your white nationalists, your white supremacists, and your white militia were about. Now, some people will say, well, can you prove that every single person aligning with that militia group was white? No, I can't. And no, it doesn't matter. A lot of people don't know this, but the SS, I'm talking World War II, German SS. How many of you knew that it was not a requirement to be an Aryan, blonde hair, blue eyes. It was not a requirement to be in the SS. You actually had ethnic factions of the SS. Most likely, if you're listening to me, you're listening to me through a device that gives you access to the internet. Check it out. Ethnic groups were in the SS. In fact, there was a Muslim SS wing. So remember, for SS, you had two constituent groups. You had the General SS, the, I don't know my German that well, Allgemein, and then you had the Waffen. So the general versus the armed, with the general being responsible for enforcing racial policy. And I think arms pretty straightforward combat units, tough combat units. But for SS did conscript foreigners and volunteers. This is not an exhaustive list, but you had a lot of non-Germans, and including but not limited to. And I just pulled this up here. So let's go down some of the groups here. You had conscription for SS units, SS Division Nordland and Westland, later called Division Viking, which basically was a, how do I say this? This basically was a setup for, it's basically conscripting Swedes, Nords. So it was called a Viking group. This was a setup for, Vikings basically. So that was one group. You also had conscription through Hungary, the Balkans, Estonia, Latvia. And then, as I said before, you had a Muslim conscripted group of SS. I say that to say not every SS officer was blonde haired and blue eyed. Hey, Daryl. Yeah, not bad advice, but actually, the majority of my people kind of listen to me like podcast radio. So most people don't appreciate my beautiful eyes. uh, so that was just me responding to a word of advice. If you're not interviewing or talking to someone directly on the set, then you should look into the camera. Yeah, I kind of take more like the Joe Rogan approach. Think how crazy Joe Rogan sessions would be if he was staring into the camera the whole time. So even when he's not talking to someone, he's kind of just doing his thing. But I appreciate the thought. So I bring it back to this idea of, if you have this notion that you need purity and evil to accept it as evil, you're going to find very few examples in history. Even the Reich, when it was necessary or when it worked to their advantage, even the Reich found ways to be EEO compliant. So just because we had Swedes and Muslims in the SS, we don't say that the SS was no longer a German outfit. No one accepts that argument. No one accepts the argument that because there was Muslim SS combat units, that we can no longer say that Nazis was of a German Aryan motivation. So I don't care how many Latin guys, how many men who don't identify as white were a part of this. It was still just like the German Aryan Nazi SS. It was the same. Doesn't change it. This is a weak-hearted attempt at bringing confusion where we need clarity. So culminating, finishing up a Group D. Yes, no matter how you spin it, no matter how many guys named Rodriguez that were part of the crew, and I know there was a couple dudes named Rodriguez who were rolling with the white militias. It was white nationalists, white militia, white supremacist. That was Group D. Now, what we need to continue with is we talked about how Group B, the rioters and the looters, for that military term, freedom of maneuver, night, and Group A for concealment. Group D had the same things. Group D also used the night. You did not see your white supremacists and your white militia running around during the daytime. They timed it for sunset. Even on their public facing pages and their groups, it was timed for staging because, they had to drive in. They staged at sunset. They also immersed themselves in a group. Now, you remember I described Group C as military that, to my belief, was mostly full Army, full National Guard Army uniforms and marked vehicles designated. I also talked about the police, which is much more varied. Group D used both the night and Group C to conceal themselves. They leveraged Group C. They embedded themselves in Group C. They immersed themselves in Group C. They took this opportunity. Their crime was also a crime of opportunity. It would not have been possible for them to commit their crimes had Group C never existed. Had the night in Group C never existed. Had you just had Group A and Group D, protesters, white nationalists, white supremacists, white militia, there would be no way to spin this as a bad people on both sides. You would have had people chanting, protesting, kneeling, praying, and other people walking around with weapons, threatening, aiming, showing poor discipline, threatening the public. That's what you would have had. Now, there are also these indirect. They also had Group B. That was, for some people, their justification. Here's the problem. None of the law enforcement deputized them. None of the law enforcement asked for them. Their support solely comes from sympathizers to white nationalists, sympathizers to white supremacy, and sympathizers to white militias. Now, why do I keep saying white so much? Because these same people would have no sympathy for black militias. I'm going to tell you this right now. If I loaded up a whole bunch of black veterans, let me think on that, Timothy. If I loaded up a whole bunch of black military veterans and we said, you know what, they're making a lot of meth out there in the country. We want to protect our countryside. We're going to load up and we're going to go start patrolling the rural areas to shut down these meth dealers. Do you think that would get support from the same people who supported this militia that drove into the city? Drugs is a crisis. It's a public health crisis. It is killing people. Do you think a black militia would get support to help do what the police clearly can't do, which is shut down the drug dealers? Shut up the meth labs, shut down the vaping, the distribution groups out there in the country. Do you think we would get support? This is where you see the lack of genuineness in these conversations and these alleged values. Because if your values are not consistent, they're not values. Your values are interest. If your principles are not consistent. They're not principles. They're partisan. They're partisan desires. They're partisan things. So those are the four things that I have. But you know what? Let's have at it. Timothy says add curfew. So why don't we say this, Timothy? Because technically the curfew is set for nighttime. So I would argue that the curfew falls under the aspect of us mentioning that night was used as concealment. So I'm not going to say no, but because, take the peaceful protesters. Curfew did not make peaceful protesters turn into rioters and looters. That's not what happened. The same way that curfew being lifted um, didn't stop criminals from being criminals. There was so much going on. We didn't talk about it, but a lot of opportunists still used all this time to try to rob gas stations. I say try because some were not as fortunate as others. There's some guy running around here with a bullet in his stomach, which, while he's an idiot for robbing things, he's got to be tough as hell if he's still alive, because I think he's on day 3, day 4 out in the wind, but he definitely took a bullet to the gut. So he's bleeding out on somebody's couch right now, trying to ask himself about the sunk cost of sitting there bleeding on a couch with a bullet in his stomach. At what point do you chalk it up, go to the hospital, and just go to jail? Never been shot in the stomach, but I've seen a couple people being shot in the stomach. And if it was my friend, I'd say, you know what, bro, let's just take you to jail, because that's not going to get better. There's a lot of things that you can ignore and they'll go away. A bullet in the gut is not one of them. So, A, B, C, D. Protesters, rioters, and looters is Group B. Police and military is Group C. White supremacists, nationalists, and militiamen is Group D. Um, Group B got to take off their costume because of the dark. So if we're going with what I'm saying, Group B is rioters and looters. I don't think Group B got to take off their costume because of the dark. I believe Group B got to immerse themselves. Oh, I see what you're saying. So basically, instead of dressing like a cat burglar or whatever, they just got to walk around in their normal clothes, stuff like that. Okay, yeah. But I argue that the crowds of people that looked like them more often than usual was more their costume than anything. Just the sheer number of people out there, the concealment. I think that, if you talk to protesters who are out there, that's a recurring theme where they'd say if somebody next to you threw something or acted up, Group C, the police and militia, would engage everyone around them with pepper bullets. So they're pointing out that there wasn't that discrimination. It was like, if someone standing next to you does something, you two are the same. So yes, I see what you're saying, and I agree. In response to my question about what would happen if I gathered a group of even black veterans to go defend the rural county that's being taken over by drugs, he's saying they'd be treated like Black Panthers that were trying to improve their own black communities, meaning they'd be treated like terrorists, like a threat. And for those of you who've been following me, you've seen that now. You've seen even how I present myself. I'm always sitting inside. I'm always speaking to you the way I'm speaking to you now. Um, you still see individuals from the public calling me a terrorist, saying I'm a threat to decency and common good. Amazingly, I still keep getting called a communist. I will never understand how I can make more money than you, but I'm the communist, given that 40% of my income goes towards taxes for people like you who say things like that I'm a communist. I guess maybe I'm a communist because I consent to the taxes. because because I didn't grab my rifle and tell the government that I'll die before I pay my taxes. Maybe if you take that angle, maybe you could say that makes me a communist. So basically, you're calling me a willing. Maybe you're calling me a productive communist. So not a communist that wants to take the stuff of others, but a communist that wants communism so bad I'm willing to work for it. Okay, fair enough. I'm an altruistic communist. Maybe you could claim that because I pay my taxes, um, and my effective tax rate, I think last I checked, is like 31, 32%. Um, I think you could call me a productive, willing, um, a funder of communism. Maybe you could call me that. So yeah, call me a funder of communists. Now I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna listen to you now, Daryl. Go ahead and look in the camera. So to Marx's point, they would be a threat. The James Baldwin, he is on tape in an interview calling out the fact that when a white man stands up and says, "Give me liberty or give me death," he is seen as a hero. He is seen as something to be proud of. He is um, he is Braveheart. He is Spartacus. When a black man says those same exact words, he is something dark. No pun intended. He is something evil. He is something that goes against decency and nature. Same words. The only difference is the color of his skin. That was said by James Baldwin in the 60s. Here we are 60 years later. I argue nothing has changed on this topic. When a black man says, "Give me liberty or give me death, I'm an American citizen," he puts a level of fear. His intentions are questionable. It doesn't matter if he served in the military. It doesn't matter his background. And actually, let's take a little side tangent there. When a black man is shot, his criminal record, meaning everything bad he's done in his life, counts. When someone like me says, "Give me liberty or give me death," my military record does not count in my favor. My service to this country does not count in my favor. I'm not given the benefit of the doubt that, you know what, this man has dedicated a good chunk of his adult life towards the idea of liberty and freedom for himself and others. So we're given the benefit of the doubt that what it meant when he went overseas is what it means now. I don't get that. That's another indication that the only thing different about me is the color of my skin. Spin it however you want. That's the only thing different about me. Not all my associates are black. So the only thing different about the ones who are white that are standing on my side is they think it's okay for me to say the same things as a white man. So anyone who has an issue with them, that is the only issue they have, that these white individuals support me being allowed to speak as a white man does and be treated the same way. That's the only issue. So coming back to the weight of words, Just because you have 50 racists in a room and I say racist 50 times doesn't mean the word gets watered down. There's this narrative being spun that if you talk about these things too much, then you it's not really happening. Basically, they're calling you boy who cried wolf. If I have 1,000 terrorists overseas, I was never told, Ray, stop counting the terrorists. Otherwise, people are going to stop thinking that we actually have terrorists. That would never fly. If there's 1,000, there's 1,000. If there's 10,000, there's 10,000. When we talked about the enemy, we talked about these different dynamics of the enemy. One of them was called strength. I mean, even internal. What is our strength? And then you go through the roster. This is how many guys we have. Strength. When you hear people like me talking about races and these groups, I'm talking about enemy strength. What is the strength of the enemy? How many of them? What is their organization? What is their interaction? When you hear me outlining the groups A, B, C, D and how they're interacting, freedom of maneuver, you might say, wow, this comes off very militant. That's how I survived overseas. Terrorist or terrorist. I don't not label terrorist because it makes you uncomfortable because this time they're not brown skin and wearing a turban. The same way bullets don't discriminate, warfare doesn't care about your feelings either. Have a good night, sir. Good seeing you, Anthony. The idea that if you name truth too much, or that you can even name truth too much, this is a narrative of those who benefit when truth is not properly weighted. I I'm reading a side comment here. I just got through private message. Someone's asking on Rittenhouse, am I the only one watching after the shots feeling like he's done this before? I would say the short answer to your question is um, no offense, but to the uninitiated, it probably does look like he's done this before. Um, I would argue he hasn't done it before. He was attempting to remember drills and training, but for a critical eye, even when he attempted to take a knee, he forgot triangle, iron stance, basically keeping your legs wide. In the heat of the moment, you're afraid. So you kind of close up. At the end of the day, we're animals. So if you hear a loud sound, I might be dating myself here, but back when I was in high school or school, you had to make book covers for your textbooks at school. But so you would take, at least what we did, you take brown paper bags. Your parents went shopping. You get brown paper bags. You bring the groceries home. You take the brown paper bag. You'd fold it up all these ways to make a book cover. But you could also fold this paper up to make what we called poppers. And then you make this big popper. Basically, it was a piece of paper with these two air pockets, and you would go down really hard and fast. And by doing that, it would make this poof sound. Um, for those who remember while I talk. And for those who don't, follow the words, follow the picture I'm painting. Let's slow down time, piece by piece, moment by moment. You slam down this popper. Person hears the sound. They don't know what's going on. Point of confusion, loud. So it's fight or flight. Most people, it's going to be, jumping, fright. What do you do in fright? You tense up, you close up, you shrink. A good chunk of military training, combat training, is killing these natural reactions. Killing these reactions so these reactions don't kill you. Combat fire team, they have a crew served weapon, a machine gun, two machine guns, saws if you're Marines, um, one if you're Army. While indeed, of course, they want to actually engage their target with these machine guns, really the primary function is due to this fight or flight, keep heads down. So what you see in the video there with Rittenhouse is him attempting to remember training, but didn't train to an adequate level, which would make sense because he's a 17-year-old kid wanting to be something he's not. Well, he's a man now. You start killing people, you're a man. But he was a child wanting to be a real man. And when he knelt down, his legs were too close. Really, he should have knelt. When you want to kneel like that, you want to kneel almost like you're squatting, you know. So had he knelt like that, almost like doing it, anyone who knows burpees or anything like that, um, or like squats, but let's stick with squats. You keep your feet at least shoulder apart. That would have enabled him to get down and get up and keep balance. He didn't have that balance training, and that's why you saw the stumble fall. So I would actually say that that wasn't his first time doing it. Now, the fact that he had the wherewithal to call somebody following, I think what I personally saw was, and I'm not going to say your name because you're on the side, but I know you're in the healthcare industry. Honestly, what I think I saw there, sir, was spectrum. I think I saw a level of spectrum being presented there. For those of you not keeping up or wanting to keep up, I apologize. Spectrum is, that scale of autism. And I use the term autism, but let's just say for this conversation right now, levels of ability to engage and interact socially, to understand social cues, to interact socially. I did not see a psychopath. What I saw was someone not engaging socially the way most people would. If you're okay taking my word for it about what I would be like in these moments, I can tell you what I would not be. I would not be thinking to make a phone call. I just wouldn't. Basically, you saw a boy do a man thing, a grown criminal, a grown man's crime. You saw a child do a grown man's crime and do what you would expect of a child. Call someone, call a friend. That was distress. At the same time, he still demonstrated his awareness of his privilege. I don't know how much you guys have seen, but when he engages and he sees the police and everything come up and he approaches with his hands. I'm going to tell you this right now. Me personally, I could have in self-defense dropped 3 white boys. As soon as the cops come, I'm emptying the magazine, emptying the chamber, dropping the weapon, getting on my knees, putting my hands behind my back. Instantly. How do I know this, you might ask? I have drilled it so many times. I have drilled it so many times. Engaging a threat till there's no longer an immediate threat to my life, and then engaging the secondary threat. So the Primary threat being maybe three people who are criminals trying to kill me. The secondary threat being the police, that because I'm black, I'm a threat automatically. I have drilled, I have trained for this. I know I can't run out of the bank after I stop the bank robbers saying, I got him, guys. I got him. I can't do that. I normally conceal carry. I knew during these extreme nights of unrest, I did not have the luxury of the Second Amendment. Me as a black man walking around, even concealed carry, had an officer shot me out of fear or confusion of my intention in the middle of the night, and I had had my weapon on me, like Philando Castile, it would not have mattered that I had concealed carry. It would not have mattered. The question would have been, well, the statement would have been, well, he was armed. That's what you would have heard. Well, he was armed. Police, you have to protect yourself. And that's another common thread that we're hearing through all this. Basically, everyone is allowed to protect themselves or their property except minorities. I am watching libertarian threads where people are saying, and I quote, just because this boy went somewhere dangerous doesn't remove his rights. So, what in effect they're saying is, it is okay that he put himself into the situation. He still has a right to defend himself, he still has his rights. What you don't hear any of these groups talking about, minorities, and I'll say the poor too, do not have rights. They don't have a right to defend themselves. If the local people who lived there started getting on their roofs of their residences and started engaging these men driving in on trucks, do you think people would have been saying they were just defending their streets? They didn't know their intentions. Who drives in from 30 minutes away to not cause trouble? Do you think they would have said that? Do you think Tucker Carlson's twisted little ferret face would have been saying this was just poor people practicing their Second Amendment rights? No. And even that, a gun in the hands of a white man is Second Amendment. A gun in the hands of a black man is a thug. Conceal carry or not, legal or not. Again, what is the only difference? Skin color. I I remember conversation a couple years back where we as a general public were becoming more aware about mental health. I remember reading a report that argues um, this argument. It argues that um, Yurianzera, tu fala português? Simono. I don't know. I think I might have somebody from Brazil. I don't I don't get to use Portuguese very often, so let's see what happens. Tu falas português? Uh oh, Brazil or Portugal? Portugal. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Oh, you're definitely Portugal. So, um, Central and South America, not all the time, but usually when they laugh. So in America, we do LOL. Okay. Oh, okay. But okay. Speaking Portuguese. Okay. So, um, so like my wife is from Ecuador, so they do JK, JK, JK. In America, we do LOL. Old Americans do ha 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 ha. So when you see KKKKKKK, Yeah, that's usually Portuguese speakers. You'll actually find some pretty funny language threads that they'll show all the people from different countries how you write in text, how you write laugh. So little useless trivia for everyone in America. When you see KKKKKKKK, and sometimes you might see. So yeah, my wife does JK. So that's like Ecuador, those areas. Um, but yeah, and you might even see yeah. You'll see that sometimes for her area as well. Oh yeah, he just put it up there. Yeah. Um, because I remember when I first saw it from a Spanish speaker, JK. I thought they were saying, just kidding. I was like, why do you keep just that? What does that mean? But no, that's not what it means. So yeah, I'll write the other one too. Let's see here. So, hey, how you doing, Paul? But I think I a little lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah. So um, hey, I'm still learning English too. Me too. También. I'm sure your English is much better than my Portuguese. Um, my brain's kind of just going different places. So actually, let's put me on the freestyle mic here. So a lot of Americans do not know this, but the majority of Africans who were brought over to the New World were actually brought to Brazil. I think the most accepted estimate is about 57%. 57% of all Africans brought over here as slaves were actually brought to the Brazil area. So that's something a lot of people do not know. I would say more than speaking Portuguese right now. Uh, eu, eu canto, eu canto português. Rodrigo Amarante, Rodrigo Amarante, canta O Cometa, O Cometa. So I was just saying in Portuguese that I sing more Portuguese than I actually speak. So I've been working on this artist, Rodrigo Armarante. He's actually the guy who's he sings the theme song for my American crowd here. He sings the theme song for Narcos, and he has another song called O Cometa. So yes, canto, sing. Um, so uh that's I think I've been doing more of that than anything. So I can play the narco lead in now. um so it's oh, we're actually out here Kenosha, Wisconsin. How do you say fight in Portuguese? In Espanol, um, uh, la guerra, la guerra de, la guerra de gentes, la guerra de gentes, um, acá, allá en Estados Unidos, Estados Unidos. Uh, Trying to say race riots, so I said war of people. the I know where I want to go next. We talked about the four groups now, and we've kind of dug into how these different groups can do the same things, and it gets treated differently. And basically, the argument that I'm making is these different groups do the same thing and it gets treated differently because of who these groups are. Meaning, crimes are not always crimes. It depends which group did it. Rights are not always rights. It depends which group is asking or trying to exercise. Responsibility is not always responsibility. It depends who we're trying to place it on or who's trying to place it on another. A minority in a situation has more responsibility to controlling the situation than someone who's not a minority. Just for a quick recap, what happened? Um, the police answered a police call. Um, the situation was, some people say, got out of hand. The situation was never controlled. And as a result of the situation never being controlled by minimum 4, if not 5 police officers by one man, this one man ended up being shot 7 to 8 times in the back. So he was shot in the back. This precipitated immediate emotional responses across these various 4 groups that we were talking about earlier. So, and no, and those are just those 4 groups. You still have larger government involved, and then the larger civilian body that was not out protesting or out being militia, and just the basic community. So you just had you just had impulses, emotions, and loose thoughts taking lead and controlling the actions of individuals. I'm always trying to bring frameworks to a situation. So when people ask me, hey, at the end of the day, what are you doing this for, Ray? Why are you doing this? Or what do you think we should be doing collectively? If you're on my team, we have 3, under our bigger mission of get everyone together and connect, we have 3 execution tasks. 1, destroy warped philosophies. Warped philosophies are, have a good night, Marcus. Warped philosophies, it is what it sounds like. If you need to know whether the person was white or black before you assign them liberties, if you need to know if they're white or black before you decide that give me liberty or give me death is an appropriate statement, that's a warped philosophy. Number 1, destroy warped philosophies. Number 2, tear down barriers to truth. Through technology, through engagement, social media, truth is more available than ever. There are people who actively put up barriers to truth. Tear those down. 1, destroy warped philosophies. 2, tear down barriers to truth. So one is removing falseness. The other is leveraging, preventing people from preventing people to access the truth. Finally, number 3, think about maybe your house. Most things have a place. But then you might have all these little knickknacks. Like I'm looking at my desk right now. Most things in my world have a place. But I'm looking at this stack of paper here. Let me just show you this. I just got this stack. Business cards, business postcards, thank you notes. Number 3 is fit loose ideas, impulses, and emotions into a structure centered around relationship and connection. That would be the equivalent of these are loose ideas, these are loose thoughts. Find a place for this kind of stuff in your life, in your society. Don't just let it keep laying around however, wherever. Those are our three execution tasks. Destroy warped philosophies, tear down barriers to truth, fit loose ideas, impulses, and emotions into a structure centered around creation, connection, and relationship. If you take those three statements and you replay what you're seeing in the news, what you're hearing from pundits, what you're hearing from our leaders of this nation, you'll realize we have a lot of work to do. And that's why you're seeing me doing this. That's why I went 11 and a half hours straight yesterday. We have a lot of work to do. Well, Rodad, to be honest, I probably have people who speak English say the same thing. You're okay, my man. So, yeah, those are our three executions. Destroy warped thoughts, bad thoughts, malamente. Tear down barriers to truth. Fit loose ideas, impulses, and emotions into a structure centered around creation, a connection, relationship. I don't remember how to say it in Portuguese. In Espanol es por supuesto. So that's what we have going right now. There is a lot of entities and organizations, and these are all comprised of people. So really what I'm saying is there's a lot of people and there's a lot of groups of people who benefit from warped philosophies, who benefit from barriers to the truth existing, and who benefit from all these loose ideas and emotions and impulses scattered about at the expense of we the people. They benefit from these things. What you have to realize, the worst system that you come across, the worst thing you can think of that continues, if it continues because it benefits someone. It benefits someone. At a minimum, someone perceives that it benefits them. And maybe that is actually more the truth these days than we might want to think. Ask the question, who would think that they benefit from this? Make it simple. Whenever you see something going on and continuing, you could say, you know what? I'm hearing a lot of things said today that were said in the 1960s. Who benefits from repeating the same things that we did in the 60s? Who thinks they benefit from it? And then go start looking how people talk. Think about that thing I just said. Who thinks they benefit from doing things that we did in the 1960s? So when you hear a white person say to you, you know, in the 1960s, riot police handled things pretty well. Or, back in my day, the cops would have handled it like this. That's one of these people. Because if it was truly handled in such a way, we wouldn't be here today. If it was properly handled yesterday, we wouldn't be talking about it today. So by default, whatever was done in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s or the 60s clearly didn't work. No different than claiming that whenever a black person wants to be treated equally, you call them a communist. That didn't work in the 60s. It's not going to work now, but you're still doing it. So who believes that it benefits them? And that's where I recommend you start. What kind of mindset, what kind of pathology? Now we're kind of going through some military things here. The 5 paragraph operations order for the military: situation, mission, execution, signal, or support, followed by signal. Um, so we talked the situation. We talked about the different groups. Have a good night, sir. Boa noche. Um, we kind of laid out the situation. I didn't actually give you direction. The um, how do I say this? The mission, but it was kind of embedded. If you heard at the end of number 3, you heard fit into a structure centered around connection and relationship. That's really our mission there. Then you heard the 3 executions, how the 3 ways we do that: by tearing down, by destroying warped philosophies, tearing down barriers of truth, and fitting the loose, randomly sorted ideas, the things that don't actually connect to something, make them go somewhere where they make sense. So let me write those out: situation, mission, execution. We have finally support and signal. I'm trying to now remember. Did I remember to? Okay, I did. Okay. For some reason, it's not letting me write in Facebook today. I must have done something they don't like. There. Situation. Mission. As soon as I learn how to spell. Okay. Now you guys got it too for Facebook. There you go. So let's get into support. Support is your adjacent units. You don't only they're not with you, but so adjacents, but also your call for fire, your Tomahawk missiles, your close air support, your eye in the sky, your resupply. What was your support? And I got to be honest, I'm asking you guys that. This is really not a time for fair weather fans. And I'm not saying me specifically because I'm here in Kenosha. I'm just saying minorities in general. Martin Luther King talked about the moderate white. I got to be honest, I'm getting a little I, I'm losing patience for moderates. If I say I want to be treated like a human being, I'm losing patience for the response: I'm not for or against. And that's what a lot of you are doing. You're seeing minorities say we want to be treated like human beings. And you're saying, hey, I got a wife and kid. I'm not for or against you being treated like a human being. Now, you might think you're not saying that, but your life path and your life walk, that's effectively what you're saying. You're saying, "Hey, Ray, I'm not for or against you being treated like a human being. I'm not against that." Even some of you will say things like, "I hope you guys get your justice. I hope you get what you deserve." What you're effectively saying is, my justice is not your justice. We are not brothers. We are not family. We are not one citizenry. We are not one America. You have your world. I have mine. You have your America. I have my America. You're okay. You won't be offended if you find out that my America gets justice. You'll allow it in your Miles Lane voice. Um, I'm trying to think of an equivalent. I would say maybe an equivalent is someone's like, "Ray, I want to be allowed to spread peanut butter on my chest and just bake in the sun." I am going to say, "You know what, man? I'm not against you being allowed to do that." I'm going to say it the way because I don't need you to be able to do that. Damn sure don't need you to do it. I don't need to be there when you do it. I don't want to be there when you do it. I don't even want to know that you did it. But as far as freedoms go, I am not going to stand in the way of you smearing peanut butter all over your chest and baking out in the sun. That is how you sound when I say I want to be treated like a human. Haven't had a TV, so I don't watch actual TV. But I got Netflix and everything, and I still love movies. Um, it's probably the hardest thing for me for COVID. Um, the nature of my work life, it's not solitary. There's a lot of interaction, but I have a lot of control over my time to where I can kind of be out on my own. And so that's, every man has his vice. Going to the movies by myself at the noon matinee is one of my vices. Just going there in the movie theater in the middle of the day by myself. That's actually when I watch most of the videos I watch. Movies, sorry. So I think about that scene in Chronicles of Riddick at the end where he's asking Kara, is she with him? And she just starts talking and he repeats himself. He says it again. Are you with me? That is how I feel right now with the part of America, not always white, but just America. When I'm telling you what's happening in my life, I'm basically saying to you, are you with me? There's only one correct response. If my wife is about to take the citizenship test, and I'm looking at the questions. A good number of the questions have more than one right answer. Now, I'll tell you this right now, most Americans, I don't think still could pass, but a couple of the questions have more than one right answer. If I say, name two wars that America fought between 1800 and 1900, since we had four of them, you there but four by default have a couple combinations there. 6. I just did it in my head. When I ask you, "Are you with me?" there's only one right answer. And I'm gonna tell you this, when I say there's only one right answer, like, remember your high school gym lock? You had the 3 numbers, so you turn left, turn right, turn left. We call it a combination lock, but mathematically, this is incorrect. This is, in fact, a permutation lock because a combination lock would mean that you could put the 3 numbers in any order and it would go in. But in fact, your 3 numbers have to go in a certain order in order for your lock to open. That's actually a permutation. So if you're single, guys, and you're on a date and you want to make sure she never calls you again, tell her that. Tell her that, combination locks should actually be called permutation locks. It worked every time for me. When I ask you, are you with me on this? If you are even halfway thinking you are interested in opening up the lock for a relationship of walking together in life, this is not a combination lock. This is a permutation lock. There's only one way to get in here. Yes. Not blah, 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 but. Not yes, but. Yes. Period. Pause. Wait for a response. We need more accountability with the words that we use. We need more accountability with the responses that we demand. I'm not going to go 18 hours tonight, but I think we're going to go into that, and that's where we're going to tie this up here, get a little philosophical. We need accountability in what is spoken. So, accountability in our prodding, our questioning, and we need more accountability and what is considered an acceptable response, an appropriate response, a correct response. We're so muddled and obscure, and we obfuscate the definition of terms so much. I'm even sitting here now questioning things I think I know. I'm hearing people use terms like post-truth, but when they talk, post-truth seems to have like 5 different definitions. Tyrone's saying here, I'm reading here what you're tracking. They never mention the shooter's dad. Most cases, they don't do that. They're incarcerated. Um, hmm. I'm wondering if your hypothesis is based on ethnic hype assumptions. Because my hypothesis was the dad was not in the picture. The original photos I saw was just him and his mama. Someone told me there was a press conference today or something with the parents, and that the parents did make a statement. I don't know. Let's just pull it up. Parents of what's that jackass's name? Um, Rittenhouse. See here. Yeah, I'm not pulling up anything right now. Try more. I should have known that wouldn't have worked. I put parents of Kenosha shooting. I should have put parents of Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay. So I just pulled up something here. I guess they found a video of him at a Trump MAGA rally doing a video interview bragging about being a vigilante before the shooting even occurred. Here, let me share my screen here so we can so I'm not leaving you guys completely in the dark here. Um, so I'm just reading through here. They are charging him like as an adult, so that was up in the air. So I actually, like I said, I didn't have much sleep. I passed out, woke back up around 9. Um, ate everything that I could see. Um, so yeah, he was at a rally. So yeah, I'm looking at these pictures here. This is where I got it from. These are the only pictures I saw. Um, so I just made the assumption because they kept showing pictures of him and his mother that there was not a father in the picture. They're showing from his Facebook page pictures of him at a Trump rally. So, yep. Uh, so yeah, I'm not seeing. I thought someone told me they had something regarding a father. I'm not pulling up anything. Let me see what you got here, Paul. Let me try to pull this up here. Also, pulled the criminal complaint. First degree reckless homicide. I did hear that. First degree recklessly endangering safety. Class B felony, Class F felony. He's only facing 5 years? Okay, okay. Well, no, that's 5 years. 5 years, 5 years. So he's really only facing 5 years for murders? Oh, I'm reading this wrong. So I'm only reading at the very bottom here. So 12 years, but it can be increased by 5 years because he had the weapon. So the 5 years is added on into addition. So life imprisonment plus 5 years. Okay. 12 years plus 5. Okay, I'm misreading. So what is looking like here is the weapon is an enhancer for all of these because it is a firearm, I guess. It's adding on 5 years for each of these charges. Smith and Wesson. So someone asked me that yesterday, so now you know. Smith and Wesson AR 223 2. So okay, and they have the full. So that's good. The okay, so yeah. So they're here. So uh-huh. He did call a friend, not his mother. People were talking about that. So good. Charge him as because I was, you know, even though I shouldn't be worried about it. I was worried that they were gonna try to charge him as a child. So actually, that was definitely a concern of mine. So yeah, the thanks, Paul. Yeah, because I do want to go back to that later. Oh, so yeah, I didn't see you wrote it before I said it. Yeah, it's 5 extra. So i- he's still being made a martyr. And I think we can understand it. We don't have to like it. We don't have to condone it. Um, but we can talk about why it's not being condemned his actions. And I think you can honestly come back to those four groups I mentioned, and even if a person's not actively one in one of those four groups, so you weren't actively a protester for Black Lives Matter, you weren't actively. Have a good night, Timothy. I'll be going out pretty soon as well, guys. I'll just do a little philosophical, then we'll be done. So if he wasn't actively one of these groups, um, if you're not actually one of these groups, um, I argue that you align or you're empathize with one or more of them. Now, some I'm seeing, I'm seeing a lot of again this fence sitting. It should be okay for me to like everybody and denounce all bad people. You haven't said anything though. You haven't said anything. I can love everybody and still I can believe that every human life matters, but still stand against human A when they're trying to harm human B. I can think every human life has a value. I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe a counter example. I can see a person who is abusing drugs, they are not living like they value their own life. I can still engage them with the awareness that they don't live like they care about their own life and still care about their life. While I can't make somebody do something they don't want to do, I definitely don't need their consent to value their life. I don't need a drug user's consent to decide that their life has value. So when you sit around saying, "Oh, I love everybody, I love everything," what for a person like me, what you're telling me, there's an old school saying, no answer is an answer. So if I say, "What do you stand for?" And you go, "Hey, Ray, I love everybody. I got no issues with nobody." No answer is an answer. That means you stand for nothing. In business, when I walk into a room and I say, "Who's responsible for this project?" If you tell me everybody's responsible for this project, my response is that means no one is responsible for this project. I'm going to say that again. If you walk into a room and you ask who's responsible and you get the answer, "Oh, everyone's responsible," that means no one is responsible. So when you ask somebody, "What do you stand for?" and they say, "Oh, I stand for everything," they stand for nothing. I have earlier been often found saying that if I could do one thing to fix America, it would be to teach Reconstruction history. I now want to teach two things. I want to teach Reconstruction history and I want to teach virtues and ethics. So maybe I first want to teach virtues and ethics and then no, I want to teach Reconstruction. No, I want to teach Reconstruction first. Then I want to teach virtues and ethics. Because what I want my students to start doing is, as I'm teaching virtues and ethics, the second class, they're like, "Wait a minute," and they want to go back to the lessons from Reconstruction. Agreed, Timothy. The dichotomy box. I sometimes call it the false binary. I mean, honestly, I gave a speech, Waukesha Saturday for Black Lives Matter, and I said that in the speech where I know we keep saying black, white, and it's important in very many cases. But I don't see this as a black white, even though these are racial strifes and they are based around racism. I don't see whites collectively on the other side and blacks collectively on the other. In fact, for every black person I saw protesting, I will throw out the number 7 to 9 white people. So this can't be race on race. This is a culture war. And as we just said with those four groups, we have more than two cultures. We have two predominants. We have two predominants, but there's a lot of subcultures and adjacent cultures. It's an ecosystem. It's like swirling water, trying to. It's like swirling water coming from different places at different temperatures. Yes, I agree. Um, Here's the thing, let's talk about. I think that's. I think I feel bad for you guys that are listening too much to me. You're hearing too many of the same quotes from James Baldwin and Einstein. Make it as simple as possible, but not simpler than it needs to be. Indeed, the labels is getting a bit much. Having said that, labels do have a value. I'm good with that. I I plan on engaging the Reconstruction a lot. I plan on engaging um, the mirror similarities between the tactics of the civil rights era or against the civil rights area then and now. Um, I think this is what needs to happen, and I don't think I'm alone. And sounds like I'm clearly not alone by what you're saying. Absolutely. Maybe they don't have to be separate lessons. Maybe roll up Reconstruction with virtues and ethics. How about the anti virtues and anti ethics of the Reconstruction, um, of abandoning Reconstruction? That should be a course. The anti ethics and anti values of abandoning Reconstruction. I'm gonna write that one down because I'm gonna forget it in the box here. So yeah, let's recap it for the night. Then we started off with the weight of words and how words matter. We um, maybe I should have titled that this. That's what I should have titled this one tonight. Words matter. Um, all words matter. Maybe that's what I should have said. We went through our A, B, C, D groups. We talked about from that situation. Those four dynamic groups, plus of our larger moderates. We then jumped into the idea of what are our three execution pieces: smashing warped philosophies, breaking down barriers to truth, and fitting loose impulses, emotions, and ideas into a structure of relationship and connection. We then went into support, and that's kind of where we dug back about um, stop letting people be these fence sitter. That's not support. Saying I love everyone is not support. Saying you don't see color is not support. It means you do nothing. We talk about no answer is an answer. So yeah, let's. I think our tie up will be that fifth part of the mission, the operation order for the military signal. How do we connect with each other? We're doing it right now. This right here is us connecting. This is us signaling. This is us communication. You can reach out to me on my YouTube page. Go ahead and follow me on my YouTube page. You'll get a notification when I'm doing these. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitch as well. I'm now working with a team to where these longer videos, we're going to be cutting out excerpts and putting those out there. Become part of the good fight horn. If I say something that makes sense to you, then that means it might make sense to someone else. Put it out there. Now we know how people are. If you send someone a link to my 11-hour podcast, they're probably not going to push play. So help me out. If there was a topic that you heard me speak about, send me a private message. Send me an email. Email is raymond.k.roberts@gmail.com. It's my name, raymond.k.roberts. What you see there on the screen, just put dots before and after the K at gmail.com. Send me a timestamp when about I said something and say, hey, that thing you said the 5 minutes before that, 10 minutes before that, I vote that should be a clip. I have a team of guys going. What that will have them do, we download all these podcasts. We will cut those pieces up and we will put them out there. That is the signal. Help us boost the signal. We've talked about the situation on the ground, situation, big picture and zoomed in. We talked about the mission, relationship, and connection. We talked about our execution pieces. We talked about support and what support really means. And We've talked about the signal, these engagements here, give and take. Everyone have a good night. Thanks for staying up for those who stayed up. And we'll talk again. I'm not going to say tomorrow. I have a feeling I'll be going live within the next 24 hours again. So let's just continue walking life together. Have a good night.